Good morning, everyone. This is Ahmad Moradi. Happy Thursday. Welcome back to our normal schedule on Thursdays, held at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, where we obviously try to inform, communicate, and educate our clients, our colleagues, our followers, and discuss different subject topics that its relevance brings new light, new objective, new ways of thinking. And today, our conversation is going to be how to apply the HTML5 standards and WebRTC with blockchain and strategies in business. So one of the areas that we felt is extremely important to understand, because everybody talks about blockchain, everybody is trying to get into the marketplace. People that they are investigating about these researches and trying to get their hands down and dirty, they are kind of confused in many instances. And with the research that they read, not only gets more confusing, but they try to figure out who's on first. So my hope is today to help you to understand a little bit about how WebRTC and technologies like Pixel can accommodate you with ways that you can build protocols and blockchains that it can really become more meaningful. First of all, I like to have Maddie to present you with a little bit of my screencasting. So we're going to go from a little Zen ocean view background into really looking at some of the credits that has been provided. These are supplied by Blockchain Visual, like BlockGeeks. BlockGeeks actually is a good place to start if you want to get your feet wet, so to speak, and understand some of the issues about the blockchain. But I wanted to show you some visuals in here to give you some of the old traditional versus new ways that blockchain looks at things. The old ways, when I used to work in my lifetime, and most of the mainframe days and mini-frame days and the LAN and the WAN and all of these operations were mostly designed on centralized topologies. So this topology that you see in here, a centralized format, is basically the networks that we were using in the past, for decades actually. And then we decided to get into LAN, local area networking, and building different structures with different protocols and operating systems such as Novell, Microsoft, multi-user operating systems, Linuxes, and so forth. They all started embracing and bringing areas of decentralized networking systems. And obviously with that came into peer-to-peer, because one of the areas of peer-to-peer versus the decentralized versus centralized in here, you have a control of everything like a TCP/IP. But in here, when you're coming to the decentralized format, then you realize that there are nodes, there are gateways, there are possibilities that you need to be mindful about when you're looking at the architectural aspect of this matter. In blockchain, distributed ledgers are replicated where it makes the process sophisticated in many ways, and at the same time, it brings a series of areas together. But before I go further into this subject, I really want to first talk a little bit about a brief history of blockchain technology, because a lot of people don't have that knowledge again. So back in 2008, when Satoshi Nakamoto, who really his true identity still is not known, released a white paper that now we refer to it as a Bitcoin. It was a peer-to-peer electronic cash system that in 2008 described purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash known as Bitcoin. So blockchain technology was really the foundation of building Bitcoin. A lot of people think of blockchain synonymous or equivalent to Ethereum or to Bitcoin and so forth, but there are many variations of this coming together. So first thing you have to understand, blockchain is a technology, and you have to look at it from that standpoint. And then the history of itself that started from Bitcoin. We really don't get into a discussion of those, but we need to touch upon it, that blockchain is to Bitcoin what is internet is to email. Okay, that's really the best example that Sally Davis from Financial Times Technology suggested to the industry, that if you want to look at this kind of yin and a yang, they're necessary. They need to be together. And then as PCs and so forth, they connect together and the distributed ledger gets larger and larger, just like you see in here. For example, then you can appreciate that there are a variety of things, from safety, from connectivity, from users, devices, and so forth, that it all brings that together. One of the area that people want to get their hands down and dirty, first of all, is in the area of WebRTC. Because in the WebRTC area, one of the things that you have to look at it is, what is my point of inception? My point of inception has to create the point of trust. And the point of trust has been one of the biggest issues with Bitcoin and with some of the other organizations, that they have over time built trust factor. So that's why you look at exchanges and you look at the transactions and you look at things that is going on in the marketplace, not to mention the regulations, because regulators such as Security Exchange Commission and NASDAQ or other institutions like Euronext, Alternext, countries like India, they are all looking at blockchain and they are trying to ban it for the usage of what we call appreciating or depreciating your tokens. So this kind of subject, again, becomes part of the controversial era that we are dealing with blockchain. But my view has always been blockchain has merits, availability, and use, and some of these areas needs to be taught. And that's why organizations like Corsia or you find organizations like Blockig, that they have a large population of programmers. A lot of time you need an advisor or programmer to be able to assist you in this process, because just knowing about the process itself is a science. And at the same time, there are people that I have met in my career that they have been like head of the cryptocurrencies for Goldman Sachs. And they have spent over 15 years of their lives in researches and so forth. So as you can see, there are courses that you can familiarize yourself, let's say, with crypto economy, with the intro to the Bitcoin or Ethereum and so forth. And as market goes into the market, one of the things about this factor is the audit. Okay, so therefore the audit side of it makes it where somebody cannot tamper with the original source or the assets that they refer to. The area that we felt that there are barriers into the market was really one of the areas that I have been researching for the last few years personally, along with working with WebRTC and real-time communications. But one of the areas that has been a barrier is regulatory uncertainty. Right now, most countries do not want companies by themselves to manufacture or produce their own currencies. They lose the control, and that is why things have become regulatory. SEC has made it very simple. It says if your coin appreciates or depreciates, then you subsequently are subject to SEC rules. And recently, they prosecuted a bunch of people as a result of it. Then there are areas where you're talking about the transition phase of the likely barriers of blockchain. Different parties have to join forces. This is where trust factor has to be built. Organizations such as IBM, Disney, that they have built decades and centuries of reputation over trust factor with their clients are earning those market position, because every startup who starts with their own things, they want to become the king of the hill, but obviously there are barriers to the market, and that is one of them is the lack of technological maturity. So with that, you also have the lack of acceptance in industry, because if you come to me with your blockchain and you want me to integrate it into our services, I need to be sure in order to protect my clients, my users, my subscribers. So again, back to the trust factor. The other area that has become very, very dangerous, because this is a gold mine for the bad guys, the hackers, is the data security concerns. You know, if you are a peer-to-peer and you have built this kind of topologies, like I just showed you, and imagine you are one of the nodes in here in this distributed ledger, and a bad guy can get into this node and steal information, okay, or harness or do something and eventually be able to penetrate like cancer to the other nodes, then you're creating possibility of danger. And that danger may not appear immediately, but over a course of time, it surfaces, and that's when it's too late. So you have to be careful with your data security, how you fundamentally are intending to make sure that that data is secure. And that is why there are structures, platforms, topologies, protocols that have been published, identified for colleagues to be able to accommodate. And a lot of people right now, they don't see the benefits. You know, CEOs of the companies, the CMOs, the C-levels, they're trying to justify the value of their benefit. Example of that I can give you is a company called Dragon Chain. And Dragon Chain, for example, is a company that originally was part of Disney. This group of colleagues originally, when they were working for Disney, they decided to leave and they built their own protocols. Disney funded them for over $100 million. But here is where blockchain can become very valuable because they can manage Disney's digital assets. So now Dragon Chain becomes a very good way for content protection. So when you add real-time communications, let's say the Dragon Chain for authentication, verification, rights management, and all of these other factors that we all have to build in digital economy, a protocol like this enables organizations to build enterprise capability, which they call it BaaS, for a new term, blockchain as a service, integrate the BaaS into WebRTC services and be able to harness both powers from the point of inception. So one of the things that we've done as a company is embracing these guys by creating the pixel where our point of inception to the point of exit can be recorded, maintained, and handed over to the blockchain guys so the trust factor can be built. Example, let's say right now I became a victim of a couple of hackers ourselves and scammers. So I use myself as a case study because I'm not only feel I'm relatively know a little bit more than others, but also you can tell the level of their sophistication and intelligence. So our goal is being always to look at those as a way of preventing and protecting the data for our clienteles. So in this kind of blockchain where you have to come in, if I wanted to do a commerce, let's say with my colleague, Mr. Vijay, the managing director of Viper Corporations, and I had no knowledge of him or known him before, I could bring him into my blockchain venue. I could be able to register him. I could do a transaction with him with the video recording and put that video recording as a part of the blockchain. So in the future, if anybody questions that Mr. Vijay is not who he pretended to be, I have a way of verification and authentication. This is also becoming paramount for organizations that we are working around the globe, building, let's say, real-time communication for election. Election could use blockchain for authentication with the national ID. For example, a person who is born in that country with their national ID and credentials and so forth can become the trusted source because that is the source, verified by authorities, added to the blockchain library for access, verification, authentication, and being able ultimately bring that everything to wireless society through digital economy to do various transactions, commerce, and so forth. The other side of this that we studied and learned, I met with the colleagues at IBM, and we looked at Hyperledger. Hyperledger Foundation, actually, it became an open society, a global forum that it's based in Basel in Switzerland. and it's going to be featured actually on December 12 to 15 about the subject, which again, if you're interested and you have time and you wish to attend, it's something that you could do. It is the Linux Foundation events, and the speakers that are going to be available in this session are going to be the colleagues that are coming from different parts of these fabrics and corridors of business and industry, that they are enlightening how they can be used, applied, and so forth. And at the same time, this relationship can help you to understand that if you work with an open foundation, then you have a greater probability of learning, applying, and not cornering yourself into one area. So for that reason, IBM built Hyperledger opportunities and operations. So Hyperledger right now is an organization that you can attend and you can become a member. You can follow them on their Facebook pages or LinkedIn and so forth again. And with this participation, it allows you to obtain all kinds of data, information, joining other supporting initiatives that is going on, and working along with these groups to learn more about Hyperledger and how it can work. And then colleagues like OneChain joined Hyperledger, and other organizations from the globe that they're joined to embrace the Hyperledger as an open system builds the trust factor. That is the most important thing, that if you again go back to the barriers and look at that kind of side of the equation, you will find that kind of interesting. We also looked at the industries in here to be sure that where things are going and how it's going. One of the areas that we saw very strong was Germany, actually. One of our colleagues that I know through Mr. VJ for many years, who lives in Southeast Asia, has been a catalyst working in Germany to help them to bring the blockchain technology and IoT and IoE to this market. So one of the areas is Germans, obviously, that you have to look at as a competitive market. The other area is that you see a strong foothold naturally is United States, but the traction in Germany has been tremendous, okay, just to let you know. You also have to look at it where the blockchain logistics are working. Strong in certain areas, such as logistics services like distributions, manufacturing, in science. Very little in retail right now because it has not really manifested itself, but there are possibilities for security. There are what they call jailbox in devices that they build, that, for example, items that are very expensive, if you go to the grocery stores, you will find them that they are in a shelf or in a box or with some kind of a identity recognition, so forth. This kind of things with the blockchain can be easily removed and traced and tracked. And this way it eliminates fraud, theft, and so forth. So those kind of things in retail is going to be profoundly applicable. On the consulting side, I have areas that right now a lot of people are jumping as catalysts, trying to educate the market as this market is evolving. And they're learning as well as the industry. So the consulting, it's an evolution by itself. So you have to remember, since the industry is new, technology is new, the consultant's background and depth is relatively new. The other side that you see is on the company headcounts, corporations that they got less than 250, the rate of adaptation is faster because of being smaller and being adopted, versus the companies that they got larger organizations and so forth. So this kind of equation, again, becomes part of the elements that we all have to be cognizant about. Back to some of the areas that we feel, again, that the company should ask itself, where do I stand? Where am I? Am I at the birth of the blockchain? Am I in the beginning of the development? Am I mature enough to go to the market and so forth? These are the areas that I think it should be investigated as CMOs, CTOs, CEOs, and various C-levels of organizations. They sit together with the board and decide about their future on their digital economy. My suggestion has always been you have to create a point of trust, which real-time communication as a technology enables you to accommodate that. Then build into a blockchain protocol strategy where tracking and everything else can get authenticated, verified, and build that into your e-commerce modules and your transactions that you're going to deploy and the services that you're going to be bringing into the digital commerce. So one of the areas that you obviously understand, these blocks are extremely important for you to educate yourself. Again, because of the time element, I cannot really go into depth of the conversation, but I can give you some general outlines that a lot of people stay away from this token for now because of the liability on the SEC, on the regulations, on the cryptocurrencies, and so forth. So don't think everything has to become cryptocurrency from blockchain. Actually remove blockchain from cryptocurrency and you'll see it in a new light. That's the general idea. And once you see that as a new light, you're going to see that real-time communication and Pixel can enable you to create the point of inception through metadata. And metadata can give you the video and the clips and the transaction that it took place. And every transaction can be video-based. Because after all, if you're talking about video being the most profound protocol for real-time communications, then why not deploying it into our blockchain strategies, where this kind of things builds the chain of trust. And once you know your customers, like they call it KYC, obviously the source of fund has been validated because you know you have your source and they have their source through peer-to-peer. And then you have your POF, which is your proof of funds, because you can do the transaction in a similar setting like an HTML5 room in here and be able to conduct transactions. So this kind of areas, again, becomes extremely important that we want you to be cognizant about. So one of the areas that you need to, again, be aware is through blockchain, everything is decentralized. That's the whole idea, through peer-to-peer. We use peer-to-peer for our communication. So you can see the parallels of real-time inception, creation of knowledge, information, data that it's needed, feeding it to the peer-to-peer network so it can get replicated, and then obviously through trust factor when it's verified and the signatures, and then obviously when it goes into an immutable protocol through consensus and algorithm that nobody can find that. But there are also learning experiences coming in here. It's called your network, because as this network increases, the usage of your network and the peer is going to increase. So there are considerations that you have to keep in mind, that if you're going to build this large network and this network is going to be through decentralized and peer-to-peer, you're taking resources from them. Okay. Other thing that we feel is important is really initiatives like you see in Hacker, that cities are going into blockchain. Well, there is a good reason for it, because of Internet of Everything or Internet of Things. Because one of the areas that when you come to a city like this and you see either these cities are built, such as old cities like New York cities and so forth, or London and Munich and those old cities, or new cities, metropolis like Dubai and Singapore and new innovations, Shanghai, Beijing, and so forth, then you will find yourself into signal confusion, what I call it. The signal confusion is because you're following a series of frequencies. These are frequencies where you run on 2.4, for example, 5.8, or other licenses that the government grants us in that nation to establish our microwave, our cell towers, be able to build our Wi-Fi's that ultimately is going into what we call 5G. So with the initiative on the 5G and devices in here, I can give you one example myself. For instance, I received two devices in here from two different manufacturers based on the same frequency, and I connect them to two different TVs, two set-top boxes for the R&D, and the moment I press one button in here, the other TV reacts, and I click on this button, the other TV reacts. Although they have two different manufacturers, but they followed what I call signal confusion. Why? Because imagine you want to turn on your light and all of a sudden your faucet turns on. And imagine you want to turn on your faucet, your light comes on. Well, that gets annoying. That's called Internet of Everything, because signals are communicating constantly with your refrigerator, with your washer, with your dryer, and you're sitting in this city. So city has a responsibility to manage its signal, because otherwise I can be pulling your curtain from your house while you're doing something else through IoT. So security, signal management, processing all of these factors becomes all initiatives that we are going into the next generation of smart cities. So blockchain is extremely valuable for these kind of things, because every manufacturer's footprint, devices, and so forth can be protected, can be decentralized, can be established based on consumer behavior, because people like different brands, right? Some people like GE, some people like Samsung, some people like LGs or other brands, AE or AEGs. And what happens is, obviously, consumers, as their budget, preference, product lines that they're going, they are basically trying to create that into a home network, technically. Recently, as you've noticed, for instance, Amazon just released a series of product lines outside of their shopping spree because of the smart homes, because of their Alexa, and connecting to different devices. So this is going to be the trend that, unfortunately or fortunately, we're going to take the quantum leap and going toward this. And we hope that you take those information into account and understand that everything starts in our mind with real-time communication. That's called point of inception. Then everything gets into real-time communications, because you are doing something. And everything has to be validated and trusted through, and then these has to be translated into signals. And these signals, they all have to talk into smart cities without the hackers being able to risk the entire existence of the population. So everything that I want you to think is upside down, like a little pyramid, that you have to start from the security in mind, to signal processing in mind, to blockchain in mind, to real-time communications and other status of your software and services that you build into an infrastructure, into a platform, and into your BaaS model called. Okay. So with that, I'd like to thank you again for this big session, and don't forget to like us on our pages, and we hope to see you next week again. Thank you for your time, and have a great week.